When the choice seems to be to tear down the church
or build a wall around it,
we aim to walk the narrow road of nuance
through the wilderness between the warring factions
and try to figure out what it means
to love God
and people well. Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to Unbetween. I say back because it's been a minute, and our goal is still the same: to make more episodes, to do more, and to have tougher conversations. We hit a little hiccup in, maybe not too big a one. We've missed an episode or two that we would have liked to put out, but we're jumping back in and recording. Taylor, what do our folks have coming up for them this week?
What do our folks have coming up for them this week?
Yeah, on the podcast.
Oh, you mean what is this episode about?
I was trying to be creative. Thanks, man.
I don't know what it's about.
Should we start over again?
No, we should not. Well, we have a conversation around, imagine this, making sense of the middle ground between two opposing viewpoints. I know y'all are shocked at the fact that we've
never done that before.
Having another conversation about that. But really, it's just where we find ourselves continually trying to make sense of the this and the that around life. And we talk some basically about bearing with one another in love, and we do talk some politics. We're kind of... Those voices are kind of shouting culturally right now, and so there's kind of a lot to say and a lot to think about. So we do talk about that some, but really at the root of it is just like how do we bear one another's burdens in love as people of faith, and how do we respond to a world that doesn't run to the rhythm of Jesus, if I can put it that way.
Yeah, it's important.
Let's hear more.
So what's it been, a month probably since we have recorded?
Yeah, something like that. Pretty close. And we'd settled into a pretty good rhythm. So much of this is not, finding things to talk about, but it's just getting into the regular rhythm of when to bring it up and when to plan it and when to make it happen, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and life happens in the midst of that.
It does not.
It's it can be interesting. I joked with Taylor, I don't know, probably about a month ago, that we needed to tell our bosses, like, we have to share light weeks and heavy weeks so that we have time for this. But it is very much that, and I know we've each gone through different, like, kind of portions of that, and trying to balance, your main, the thing you do that keeps the lights on at your house and keeps your family fed, and because those things are good, and then the other things that are passion projects or things that God has called you to that you feel like you're supposed to pursue, and sometimes that's tough. I totally understand that.
Yeah, but so worth it though.
It is, and I noticed a difference. It's been about, and I don't know, I may be wrong, in a month. I think it's probably been about a month since we released the last one.
Yep.
And it's I can go a couple weeks and feel like it's okay, because I know that means we are soon. A month, it was hard to go through, because it's like, man, that's something that's filling, even just our conversations that we have on a normal basis, that, when we're busy, we don't have as much. So it's like, okay, well, you notice that's missing after about 4 weeks, I feel like, and it's like, man, we got to do this. Because I miss it. But
it's interesting because y'all may not know this, but we've never actually recorded in person in the same room ever.
Yeah.
And this is the first time.
Yeah.
I had something to do on the side of town where Ryan lives, and I finished that up right about the time that we had talked about getting together. So it's like, well, I'll just bring my gear with me, and we'll make it happen.
I don't know. It's just nicer to have those conversations in person, which we get to have those. Like, we'll go for a drive or get together for lunch and say, man, we should have recorded this. But because that is so much of what we do, is just talk about what's going on and in our lives and culture. Somehow it always kind of ends up the same place, even if we're just together kind of shooting the breeze. But
yeah, we've both talked about the fact, well, a couple things, that it's not that we don't like small talk per se, but if given the choice, the way that we'd like to spend our time with other people is talking about meaningful things. Yeah. Like we cut up and we joke and all that kind of stuff, but woven in and around the good time we're having is the, like, it just kind of bubbles up, Yeah. I remember when I was younger kind of noticing that the folks that I was around, like, oh, we're not having to try and interject Jesus into things. It's just what we're thinking about.
It just happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's great, where it's not like, okay, it's time to talk about the thing now. It's like, man, this is just a part of my life, and I can't, I don't have to try to make it come out necessarily. It's just there.
Yeah, and that's how it should be, right? I mean, I think
so.
we've segmented things. We've talked about this a little bit, but segmented so much into, well, this is my work, mentality, mindset. This is my church mentality, mindset. And what you end up doing is creating very different personas across different aspects of your life where it should all be together, and you have people, we've even joked about, you're probably more honest with the people at the bar than you are with the people in the church. And, and that's not at all what it should be.
Yeah. It's interesting. I had this is a while ago, but I work with a whole lot of different people in a bunch of different entities and things because of the nature of what I do. And somebody remarked, "Hey, you have a different dynamic with those folks over there than anyone else does." And I was like, "No, what do you mean?" He's like, "Well, like people don't necessarily get all laughy and jokey with them." And I was like, I'm not trying to be laughy or jokey. It's just that I like enjoying the people I work with, and for me, humor and a lightheartedness is part of that. I mean, obviously, we take the work seriously, but just I don't know any other way to be. I'm not trying to do anything, but that thing of like I just hopefully I'm more or less the same person wherever you might find me. I hope that's what I hope. That's what I shoot for anyway. I hope that's true.
Yeah. I find that personally. Not that you're looking for my validation, but
I don't care what you think.
I find that. There's things that shift. Obviously, if you're talking to someone that is more of your, I guess, a peer versus someone that you're accountable to. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
there's some
sure.
dynamics there, but for anyone, I'm not saying you specifically, but like I think you're right. Overall, we should be able to have that rapport, and I think that's important because I think there's a mentality that the people in your church should never see you upset, or and if that's the case, they're probably never seeing you really get passionate about something you believe in.
Yeah.
Because I know for me, when I do, there's people who look at me and say, "Well, I mean, you kind of got in a fight with so and so." I'm like, "No, I didn't. This is just important to me, and it's gonna show. You're gonna hear my voice, get a little higher pitched. You're gonna hear me get a little louder because this is important." And sometimes it doesn't seem like everybody understands that importance. It's like my kids. I'm not trying to yell at them all the time, but when they do something that is, life-threatening or, sitting there playing with sticks, snakes, or whatever,
snakes.
I may raise my voice a little and tell them, "Hey, let's not do that," so that they understand the importance of it, because I know my kids. None of the three are going to stop what they're doing if I'm like, "Hey, maybe don't touch that." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not that I don't try that first, but I'm very quickly going to be like, "Hey, put that down. It will bite your face off," because there's an urgency there that if we don't pay attention to the problem, something really bad's going to happen.
I think urgency is the key word.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder, that word has an interesting connotation because you almost think of emergency. But what we were talking about a minute ago is the stuff that's important bubbles up.
Yeah.
And I wonder, to your point, how often we keep the stuff that's important out of our conversation and out of our casual acquaintance relationships and even out of our church experience, where what is most important to us is actually not what we spend our time thinking about and talking about to the people around us.
Well, we've probably all heard the thing like, if you want to make friends, don't talk politics or religion, and...
Yeah, but are those friends or friendly acquaintances?
I don't know, and that's what I'm thinking here. Like, I think we've for so long tried to keep either politics completely out of the church or too wound up in the church and not talked about it healthily. Healthily, is that a word? I think so. In a healthy manner. I'm all about creating words. But I think, we're even us on the podcast, we don't want to get too wrapped up in politics or be a political podcast, but there is so much now that I think is an outflow of either trying to wrap it too much or not enough in the realm of, and I hate to say in the realm of the church, but in the realm of our beliefs.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it comes back to the whole echo chamber thing, where you're going to pull in, even from a politics standpoint, you're going to pull whatever you want to into your thought processes and ignore the rest. And I think there's got to be a level of understanding and middle ground to really understand the impact. But I think that there's been this kind of, I don't think bias is the word, but like trend of just ignoring it and hoping it'll go away within the church or it'll settle itself. In some regards, it's tough because I think there's multiple facets there. There's some who, oh, I'm just going to ignore it and it's not going to be a problem. Or, I'm not supposed to be focused on that at all, which there's probably valid points to any of these, but then on the other spectrum, it's, well, this is, completely what should drive our beliefs, and that's not right either. But
No. Somebody said something to me recently that has been super helpful, really in all walks of my life. And it's the last 10% of the conversation that most people don't want to have, but it's that last 10% of what needs to be said that actually it will make the difference in the interaction. And so it really landed on me to help motivate me to make sure I'm being honest with wisdom, and saying what actually needs to be said and not stopping short of, even if it's uncomfortable, but that if you want real relationships with people with room to talk about politics and religion and money or whatever else, that final uncomfortable 10% has to be on the table.
Yeah.
And it's hard to, it's super uncomfortable, especially with people that maybe you have to see every Sunday morning.
Right.
And how do you meaningfully be honest with people with the understanding that the equity has to go both ways? And how do you cultivate expectation for that? That's challenging stuff.
I think sometimes too, like what we're talking about may not even be so much political as moral. I wonder how much we try to lump into that. We try to make political when there's probably a more biblical reason for it.
Well, I think you're right. I think the reality is that we want politics to administer our morals to other people.
Right.
And that
that's never been the function of...
Well, it's tricky. It depends on who you ask and which part you look at. But I think it comes back to comfort, actually. We've talked about this a little bit more, that if our own morality, if the things that we think are true that should be upheld, if those are the law of the land, then that means we don't have to be uncomfortable. And so part of the kind of vitriol or conflict that it comes from is you have opposing moral viewpoints who both, the camps of which both think that the way that we view the world and the way we do life should be the law of the land, and should be the societal or cultural expectations on behalf of everybody. And there's the Venn diagram of compatibility doesn't overlap very far in some instances between this or that issue.
Yeah. Well, and that's interesting because you look at even, and I've listened to some interesting podcasts on this, but like the whole concept of us being founded as a Christian nation, and part of that was even based on who you talk to, back to your point, like part of that was even just to have some kind of a moral structure to govern and to keep peace in a way, more so than that all of the founding fathers were Jesus following individuals.
Right. Yeah. It's quite complicated, that issue. This is something I feel pretty passionately about, because neither, quote, side likes to be very honest about how complicated the situation is.
Yeah.
And that on the one hand, you have some folks who would like to appropriate the founders' intent and say what they meant was to create a theocracy that was ruled by the Bible.
Yeah.
And conversely, you have some other folks who want to say that no, they didn't. They wanted to found a society devoid of the influence of any religion, direct influence, and it was supposed to be free and open. And just neither of those are true. They're just blatantly not.
Right.
And this is where it makes it hard for people of faith, because it is true that the USA, anyway, was founded at least in part assuming the existence of the Judeo-Christian God and some of the principles of the Christian religion. Nowhere close to all of them. Let's be clear about that.
Yeah.
But that does not mean, and this is true and well documented, that doesn't mean that all of them were what we would call following Christ. In fact, I would say most of them weren't.
Yeah.
And that they had a civil moralistic, not deist in the classical sense. I mean, a few of them were, but
Right.
the same thing that passes for authentic faith in our nation today,
Mm-hmm.
that moralistic therapeutic deism, I've heard it called, of like, or Christian deism, if you like, that, yeah, we'll agree to these few points of doctrine, but functionally we're deist in that we just kind of do our own thing.
Yeah.
And have this kind of vague moral structure that's plugged into the idea of a God who's way up there and not all that interested in what we're doing, you know? But conversely, it's like you can't pretend that these guys weren't getting their ideas from the Bible.
Right.
It's just that's so well documented. And so
Yeah,
again,
yeah.
you have this awkward middle ground where it's like, okay, so what do we do? And what the New Testament seems to address is to be like, well, that none of that is kind of the point. To quote John Foreman, we pledge allegiance to a nation without borders.
Right.
We are a part of a kingdom that is not of this world, and our citizenship is somewhere else. We've had some of these conversations kind of before, but just that, yeah, you can lean into this here and there, but this is not going to be the solution. This is not going to be the primary way
To solve all the problems,
that's right.
right?
And the thing is, both, quote, sides will convince you that they can solve the problem.
Yeah.
If we just get these people in, if we just pass these laws, if we just have these freedoms, if we just get that girl in the White House or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's never going to work.
It's a mess. Yeah,
Yeah.
I heard, and I can't remember where I heard it. It was probably like Fox or CNN, and I'm going to get canceled by the other side. The next podcast
We'll
will
say
just
it was
be
both.
Taylor. Yeah, but they made the point like you can't legislate morality. Like it doesn't work. Part of that's because we're sinful humans, right? So you can't just say, well, it's illegal to do this and everyone's going to obey. But, just making the legislation isn't necessarily going to solve the problem when you've got all these different sides and people out there.
But the tricky thing is, that's exactly what a law is. It is a legislated moral code.
That's right.
And so, again, this is where it gets tricky. Our societal morality has to come from somewhere. Like the laws have to derive from some kind of universal truth, and who gets to decide what that is?
Right. Especially when not everyone has the same belief system.
That's right. So we've answered it,
Because
clearly.
we would say, cool, next. Yeah, because, it's easy as believers to say, well, I know where that comes from.
Yes.
But if you don't believe
Right.
in the same God that we do, right,
Mm-hmm.
then, or who God is even, there's, let's find every multiple facet we can.
Yes.
But, it just doesn't work that way.
No, which means it's not where we should spend most of our time and energy and resources trying to make stuff happen in that arena. It's not that it doesn't matter, and it's not that God doesn't call people at times to run for office or vote or campaign or be an activist. None of that's any of my business for somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
I'm responsible for what the Lord is calling me to do, and that's all any of us can claim, really. But the amount of time that we spend on this stuff versus loving our neighbor and making disciples, because we know that's how things actually change.
Yeah, yeah. How do you point people to Jesus? Probably not by pointing them to this legal, political structure. It's
And-
probably by starting somewhere else. And then
Yeah.
maybe that 10% when you get there, it'll change it. But-
And the New Testament is instructive in that Rome was very like America in many ways. Not exactly, but there's a lot of overlap there. And the time when the New Testament was being written and being read and being lived, the head of state in the empire in which it was written was worshipped as a living God. So, they were not attempting to change Rome. They were attempting to change Romans, if that makes sense. And not even that really. They were just trying to love and serve the other people around them who are also subjects of this pagan empire. And that's kind of where the people of God have found themselves most of the time throughout history, as a nation of exiles, either literally or figuratively, because Israel were literally exiled to Babylon. And then the New Testament authors would pick up that language and refer to the church that way. Peter does it, Paul does it, and they were talking to Gentiles. They were talking to people who weren't Jews, but they were referring to them in the same way as they had the exiled Israelites.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what we're getting at here, is that you can, it's the, forget if it's in Jeremiah or Isaiah, the whole build houses and live in them since you're in this pagan land. Seek the peace and prosperity of the city while you're there, but know that ultimately your allegiance and your citizenship is somewhere else.
Yeah, and I think that's part of what's so tough and why I don't know, probably within the past few years, I've paid a little more attention than I want to some of it, because we're almost now in this culture that's very, well, you said it earlier, there's the idea of God, but not everyone truly, knows what that is, right? It may be there for their therapy or whatever to make them feel better, but we also live in a culture that I feel like more and more every day is celebrating sin.
Yeah.
And celebrating, things that are pretty problematic. And so when you're living there and trying to raise a family in that world, even though hey, this isn't where my citizenship is, right? Where my allegiance lies, it's tough because you're trying to point your kids, your friends, your family toward God when culture surrounding us is pointing you anywhere but.
Yeah, and this is true no matter where on this quote spectrum that you fall, because we have friends that live in Portland, Oregon.
Yeah.
And that is pretty pagan, for lack of a better word, as we would define it, in terms of like it's pluralistic. Theologically and politically tends to be more left leaning.
Yeah.
And some of the things that I've heard them describe about where they live are totally foreign to where we live in the conservative South. But there's stuff about living in the conservative South that is just as gnarly and problematic, and has roots, way back in history.
Yeah.
And so it's not like any of us, there is no ideal, there is no utopia. And I think that's the lie that is told through both of those kind of thought systems, is that if we can just this, then we'll get things the way that we want to be. Yeah. Whereas for followers of Christ, it's like that's not how God works. And also everything will not be made right until the Lord returns and new creation comes. That's the end game in which the problems are fixed. And our call is to be a little fortress or a little beachhead of new creation in our homes and in our lives and in the way that we love and serve the people around us. And that's how the kingdom of God wins ground and advances. Yeah,
and to be the body, right? And so you see political parties, and even last night I was watching, I'll turn on YouTube and try and get a few updates, because I don't want to watch a whole news segment. I'll, go to sleep depressed and probably wake up more depressed from dreaming about it. But you've got each side just screaming about the other side and how wrong they are and why they've messed up the world. And maybe some of it's true, right?
Yeah.
But if we look at the body of Christ and how we're supposed to work together, I mean, I don't know. I'm assuming the body of Christ has a left arm and a right arm, right? And so how do you work together to compromise and to find a middle ground that's not celebrating sin, but also not taking the problematic things of, each side and just trying to rule based on that?
I think the reality is that there's no easy way to do that, that you do that by having that last 10% of the conversation and that discomfort, and you do that by bearing the burdens of people you'd rather not.
But is the government willing to have that 10% of the conversation? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's one thing for you and me to, but we don't get to have much of an impact.
That's not the government's job, though, is it?
I guess not.
Yeah.
They just get to scream at each other. But,
and this is a whole. No.
And I didn't want to go too political with it. It's just there's that kind of in nature that's, I don't know, for whatever reason, been a lot more apparent to me lately, based on probably even things within our community. We just had like school board votes, and so you have stuff kind of put in your face a little more, and obviously some of the stuff around presidents and upcoming election, like you're just seeing it more and more, and it's tough because it's like, man, none of these people are what I would consider good people. Like, or it would be nice if I could tell my kid to look up to their president, but hey, maybe don't.
It's been a minute.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that's the thing. I was talking to somebody the other day about this. Is for me, it's an integrity thing. Is that I could say good things about somebody that I wildly disagreed with if I felt like they had integrity.
Yeah.
Because I know some people like that.
Yeah.
Where it's like, man, we're just nowhere near anywhere close. But I will speak well of you as a person and the way that you conduct yourself. I don't believe the same things that you do.
Right.
But I don't think you're like I don't think you're a piece of crap.
Yeah.
Any more than all of us are pieces of crap.
Well, and that's part of the problem, right? Most of those people you've probably sat down and been able to have that conversation with.
Yeah, for sure.
I brought up the other day talking to someone. There's a guy who is definitely on. I don't know where he considers himself now. I think he's changed. I think he probably identifies more on the right side of the spectrum. He's definitely more conservative, but there's a meme going around. I didn't really know much about him, and then I noticed him from the meme, and I was like, I'm going to watch this dude. His name's Steven Crowder, and he will set up a table on a campus and basically say,
the change my mind
the change
guy?
my mind guy. And,
Yeah.
and I never wanted to pay any attention to it, but I watched a couple of the YouTube videos, and whether or not I agree with him or not on an issue, he's literally sitting down with people at a table and having a conversation. Now, sometimes it can get heated, but for the most part, he's just trying to make sure they understand. From the ones I've watched, I've not gone through his full, library of videos, but for the most part, what you see is him trying to communicate his point, let them communicate theirs, and see if they can change his mind, and just to lay down the facts in the process. Now, are all his facts accurate? I don't know. Again, I'm not like a disciple of this dude. I just watched a couple videos, and I thought it was interesting the ability he had to have this conversation. Now, what I have found out in recent weeks is that he did not have that ability with his wife, and there's some stuff there, and who knows? He's likely to be canceled for the way he treated his wife, which was pretty wrong from what I've seen. But it's interesting to me that we're not really willing to have those conversations because they're tough.
Yeah.
And part of it, I think, we're not willing to really do the research on the back end to be able to have the conversation.
Well, who wants to do any of that, man?
Yeah, I don't.
It's easier not to, but to drill down kind of to the next level is that to do that well, it's uncomfortable over time. It isn't just you have an uncomfortable moment, but to make sense of a relationship with somebody that you have to navigate, which all of your relationships, if you're being honest, you're going to have to navigate.
Right.
If you're being honest with the other person or other people. And it serves every one of our selfish purposes better to give ourselves a reason to not engage.
Mm-hmm.
They're from that tribe. They're problematic. They did that, and I'm not okay with that, so I'm done. Or they said this thing 20 years ago, and we know better now, so we don't need to listen to that. And I'm not even saying that that's not true sometimes of just that person that, like, some people you probably don't need to have anything to do with.
Right.
After a certain point.
Yeah. Well, and people change. There's been people I've listened to who seem to have a level head, and then the more and more you listen, it's like, oh, wait, you're going somewhere pretty not where you were.
Yeah.
Like, you took a turn.
Yeah.
And you committed, like, full speed ahead. And so then these people who you identify, with their thought processes, and there's so many words I don't even like using anymore, like identify. But like they're close to you, and you can what they say resonates with you. Then a year later, 2 years later, you're like, who are these people? And when you see it, and it's going to happen on each side, right? I mean, there's people who are going to go more one way and then others who go the other, but I think that's why it's so important for us to pay attention to even the in-between of what we're doing, the in-between.
He said it.
But there's a middle ground there that we often ignore because we've got really loud endpoints.
Do you think there's often a criticism for, like, they call it either whataboutism or, there's a criticism I've heard about trying to stick to a middle ground that is basically you're just excusing yourself from ever having to commit to a position, or you're just trying to avoid conflict for the sake of placating or whatever exactly. But in your mind, what's the distinction between what we're talking about and that?
I don't think that's true. I think it ignores the nuance of people, who don't. Because by that logic, you've got your right and your left, basically. And maybe that's the problem. We're pretending there's just two choices. But you've got the left screaming, well, if you're on the right, you're racist. Well, then what's someone who's clearly conservative but not a racist supposed to do?
Mm-hmm.
Other than say, well, I'm not that.
Yeah.
Same thing with the left. There's arguments there, right? And I think it's a problem because it ignores that people are complicated, is what it does.
Yeah. I think that's the thing. I think that's part of what people don't agree on is that there isn't this admission that people are complicated and messy. Is that in so many of our minds, like, oh, well, why wouldn't you just believe this? It's obviously true. So you must obviously be a terrible piece of crap to not believe this. So there isn't that admission that people are complicated, or for our purposes, that people are dead in their sin.
Yeah. Yeah. We're coming up on Mother's Day, and I was out shopping, spending way too much on cards for Mother's Day for me and the kiddos to give, and one of them said being a mom is, and it had like 6 things. It was like, fun, incredible, heartwarming, but they were all scratched out, and at the bottom it just said complicated. And I think that's where we come in at. There's so many things about being a follower of Christ that are blessings, right? But then it's also complicated to live in this world and then to address these things. And that's the same with just being human, because you've got people who are still learning and trying to learn. And you know what? If you're trying to learn, I hope your mind does change. Like, I hope you're realizing that the world is a different place than we thought. Because I know it is for me. Like, when I was 7, 8 growing up, like, going to school and playing, the world was a very different place than it is at 34 with kids of my own, trying to, make sense of craziness.
Yeah.
And so what I do with the information I'm receiving is very different from being a kid just wanting to play all day to having kids and wanting to protect their right to do that as a kid. But then I'm also seeing, as culture changes, that there's things that were not maybe as important 20 years ago. When I was 7, that was more than that. I'm getting old. But versus, 20 weeks ago. Like, there's just a whole lot that's happened that changes how you view things. And I would say, myself personally, I probably find myself pulling away from either from the desire to identify with either political party out there, and maybe any. In more recent conversations, I will tell people, like, I'm just kind of independent. Well, then you go, well, so you're more libertarian. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if I even want to go down any of those roads. I'm kind of removed in this. I'm going to vote. I'm going to do some of that. I'm going to do my research, but not because this party is strictly part of, or this person is strictly part of this party. It's going to be because their values line up with what I believe is important as a follower of Christ.
And again, it's not like any one person checks all the boxes as much as this or that party or public action committee or activist may want you to believe that, like, this is the God candidate. I remember a few years ago seeing, I think this was during the McCain-Obama election, that there was all these placards around that said "Vote God," and I was like, I didn't know he was running.
I wish he was. Man, that'd solve everything quick, wouldn't it?
Well, he came down and refused to run. You may recall.
That's right. That's right. He didn't want anything to do with it either.
No, he didn't, and he could have. It would have been very easy.
Yeah.
So we had Easter a few weeks ago, and Jesus came into Jerusalem for Passover, and Passover was one of the pilgrimage feasts for the Jews, and so from all over the Roman Empire, the diaspora, Jews would come back to Jerusalem 3 times a year, basically, and Passover specifically was a Jewish religious feast about their people's liberation from a foreign pagan empire. So you can imagine how the Romans must have felt about this.
Yeah.
So that's why all the Roman soldiers were there and why Pilate was there as well. But the interesting thing that I learned was that about a week before Passover, Pilate came down from Caesarea Philippi to Jerusalem, and he came at the head of his legions riding on a white stallion as a conqueror. And in the ancient Near East, if you were entering a city as somebody who was going to rule and subjugate it, you would do it on a white horse. Conversely, Jesus came in riding on a donkey, with 12 random dudes. And in that culture as well, if you were coming as a king who was going to rule, but rule peacefully and give people autonomy, you would ride in on a donkey. Yeah. And so that's the kind of political statement that Jesus makes, that he doesn't ignore it. It's not that he doesn't have anything to do with it or that he's not aware of what he's saying, because a lot of the application of his truths have political implications. Yeah. That is true. But that he reminds people, I'm not what you want me to be, and I'm not what you were expecting to be, and I'm not going to. Do you want us to call down fire on this guy, or whatever, or he's just not going to do that, and so we have to keep in mind what kind of king Jesus is.
Yeah.
Because that determines what kind of kingdom we belong to and what kind of images of our king, how we should handle ourselves.
Yeah, and repeatedly through Scripture, we see that we're supposed to be like Christ, minded like Christ, Christ-like. Like that, there's many references. I don't have an exact number, but there's a lot. I'm sure Google could tell us.
At least 5.
And so if that's the case, what does that look like for us? I mean, even to the earlier point of getting passionate about something, there's a way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, passion is going to be noticed. It's going to be verbalized sometimes, but how do you do it in a way where people take notice without being... as my daughter, when she was walking out of the room before we recorded, she looked at me and said, "Don't say anything rude." And that's become a thing because she's heard my wife say that, like, be nice. Like, we'll be going into somewhere for a conversation or somewhere, she's like, please just be nice. If we know there's, could be tough conversation and so as she's leaving, be nice, Daddy.
So to continue on the kind of Passover thing, one of the first things Jesus does when he gets into the city is he goes to the temple and starts flipping over tables and saying, y'all get out of here. Yeah. And he doesn't hurt anybody. He's using the whip on the livestock and whatever, but, that would qualify as rude as we would define it.
Yeah.
And the thing that I've thought about is how many times had he been to that temple before? It's not the first time that he's seen this, surely. Similarly to some of the people that ended up getting healed that sat next to this gate or that pool or whatever, that's not the first time he would have passed them.
Right.
Yeah. And so, but the difference was Jesus knew now is the time. All the other times he just shows up and teaches, the synagogue or whatever. But
and probably hoping, like, hey, maybe they'll hear this time and actually do this without me having to,
Or I think about, he must have been back to Nazareth dozens of times in his life, hundreds. Yeah. But there was something about that one day that he knew to open up the scroll of Isaiah and to say, I'm here to proclaim freedom for the captives and restoration of sight for the blind and, all those things. And to say, all right, it's here. It's been fulfilled. And I think he was in step with the Spirit of God. And as he put it, I only do what I see the Father doing. Yeah. And that sometimes God is very direct and says, this is exactly what's happening. Yeah. And then other times he handles things differently. So we have a model. We have a model to go by.
And that's even tough. You talk about God being so direct, because I feel that and feel that even within my life and things I see in Scripture. And that enters another part of the challenge when you've got people who disagree saying, well, this is what God says. Yeah. Doesn't make it any easier for us, does it?
No. No, it doesn't.
And then what do you do with that, right? Especially if they're contradictory things.
Well, I think what we bear with one another in love, or we try our best to, and that should be the foundation of our conversation. It should be seasoned with salt, as Paul says. Mm-hmm. And part of the reason that you and I can disagree sometimes is because I think we have a deep investment in each other's well-being, and I know that after that disagreement, we're still going to be friends. We're still going to care for each other's families and all that kind of stuff.
I'm still your friend, even if you're wrong.
Yes.
It's okay.
Oh, thank you.
No,
I'm not going to be, but that's nice.
And I don't know. Yeah, I mean, and there's a few things I feel like that we've disagreed about that are, what's the way to say that? That are...
we both felt strongly.
Yeah, I'm trying to even think of the things we have disagreed about.
There's only been a couple.
There's been a couple, and I don't feel like it's ever been... It's more a way of seeing something where there is either a biblical case either way or the other, or little things like that, as opposed to foundational things, I think. I could be wrong. You're like, no, there's these things.
And I will say two things, one to your credit and one to my detriment, is that I felt like even when we were disagreeing, you handled yourself gracefully, and you didn't try to belittle me for what I thought, even though you didn't agree with me.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't like, it was very much like, hey man, I get where you're coming from. I just can't get there.
Yeah.
But bless you. That's the way I felt treated.
Yeah.
Just so you know,
Good,
which I
good.
really appreciate.
I'm not always good like that, but I feel like with you, I'm probably a little better than with others.
But the other thing is that I have to acknowledge that sometimes I can be like, I'm like anybody else. I can carry my perspective really strongly.
Yeah.
You know, and part of that's just my personality of like I'm very. I can wax eloquent on things if I believe strongly in them. Like I try to have reasons why. I was telling somebody this the other day. I feel like there's very little in my life that doesn't have a strong why underpinning it.
Right, and then that's how it should be. I would argue. Yeah.
And so as a result, the things that I do think, I tend to think them pretty strongly because I've come to that conclusion through thinking about it and reading and researching and wrestling and all that. But that doesn't mean I'm right all the time.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that gets annoying for other people to have to be in a relationship with somebody who thinks he knows things most of the time.
I am very much, I appreciate you saying what you said, because I am very much similar in the fact that I can be very passionate. And I've probably within the last few years tried to, more so than state what I think, listen to what the other person thinks in those situations. I found that more helpful because then I can understand where they're coming from and explain why I have arrived in a different place better than if I'm just trying to shout out where I'm at, you know. And that's a big departure for me. Anyone who knows me that listens to this, who's known me in the past as opposed to like the last probably few years. And maybe not. Maybe I'm not as good as I think. And someone who I met like 2 days ago was like, yeah. But it's been very easy for me to stand on the hill and try and talk down to people about why they should feel the same way I do.
Mm-hmm.
And that implies that I think I'm right about everything, which the older I get, the more I realize, oh, man, am I wrong about a whole lot of things? Or look at what I didn't know that now I know, and that changes. You know, part of it's my position on things has changed. And the way I look at the world, back to the earlier point, has changed. And so the more you see that, the easier it is to be like, yeah, what platform do I think I have here to even speak like that?
Something that sticks out to me is the Gospels talk about Jesus growing up, and of him they say, or at least one of them, he grew in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and with people. Jesus grew.
Yeah.
Jesus started in one place and then went to another. This is very uncomfortable but he had skin, you know. He was a toddler and he got bigger. He didn't. Here's another thing. Like when Jesus limited his knowledge,
Absolutely.
and he waited on
Humbled
the Father.
himself.
Yeah, he humbled himself. He waited on the Father through the Holy Spirit to communicate to him. So when Jesus asks questions, it's not because he's trying to trap people necessarily. Sometimes he does that to mess with people.
Great. Yeah.
But other times it's like he clearly doesn't know. He wants an answer. And so I think again, it's the old cliche, who should our example be? It should be Jesus.
Yeah.
But literally, if Jesus can grow in wisdom, and that's not sinful, to be wiser today than you were tomorrow, hopefully, that's a pretty good roadmap.
Yep. Yeah. I would say so. And probably one we should strive to do. Now, again, you know, there's things that you have to do to get there.
Yeah.
Right? You're not going to sit on your couch, clock in 8 to 5, and go home and just mindlessly sit around and get there. It involves being in the Word and pursuing knowledge, which can be dangerous, right?
Yeah.
But again, you know, we've had multiple conversations. Well, not everyone's going to believe. So if you pursue knowledge and you can't understand this, I get that. But I have to think as a follower, you know, if we're pursuing Christ and knowledge at the same time, we're gonna learn some stuff.
Yeah.
To put it eloquently.
I've talked about this before, but the Shema in Deuteronomy 6, it lists all these things, and like the strength, the word for strength in Hebrew, another way to translate it is with all of your muchness.
Yeah.
Which I think is pretty cool. And that includes your political affiliation. That includes your denomination of choice or your theological camp or whatever. Is that those things, that's part of your muchness, and that should be submitted to the rule of God just like everything else should.
Yeah, and just understanding where some of those things come from, you know? I mean, we mentioned that earlier. Well, are you just not making a decision? Well, no. I mean, these are labels the world has created, many of them.
Yeah.
And, you know, you may find conservative values and things like that within Scripture, but you're not going to find a reference to the Republican or the Democrat Party. I'm sure of it, you know?
Yeah.
You may can twist it to make it fit your narrative, and go right ahead. It doesn't make it true. But those are worldly things that we have chosen to try and identify with, and we're supposed to identify with Christ.
And really, the bullet point for me, humble yourself in the sight of the Lord, and He will lift you up.
Yeah.
I think we should stop trying to lift ourselves.
Yep. I need to work out a little more if I was going to.
Hey, thanks for listening to another episode of the Unbetween Podcast, episode 33. Who'd have thought? I feel like I say who'd have thought it every time we put another one out, but
You're that amazed every time.
at least this break was only a month and not like 6 months. We did that.
That's
one time.
true. We have done that.
Anyway, we're glad that you're still listening. We're glad to continue to get to have these conversations, and we've got a whole bunch of stuff a whole bunch more things that we want to talk about. We'll hope that you will stick with us. As always, if you have any feedback, you can shoot us an email. It's unbetweenpodcast@gmail.com. We are on the social medias on Facebook and Instagram @unbetweenpodcast, and on Twitter @unbetweenpod. Ryan, do you have anything to add in closing?
I think you got it. Just thank you all again for bearing with us, for listening. We will, try to keep our rhythm up. So, yeah, I don't think I got anything else. You covered everything. I think we're good.
I also think we're good.
Yeah. Except we're all bad, because
Here we go.